Okay, so we have Chris Robinson and his wife, Genevieve Pellettier. Did I say that right?
Pelletier.
Pelletier. I was like going for a French accent there. And we're joined by their little one, which you may or may not hear throughout the recording. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. I know as parents with young kids, it's not always easy to schedule things, especially with nap times and all the stuff that you guys have to do. So I'm very grateful. The listeners are very grateful that you were able to join us. And I want to get right in and just mention for context, I had the privilege of seeing Chris perform at I wanted to say the Backdoor Comedy
Back room
show, but it's the Backroom Comedy, and so funny. And so I'm so happy that we're able to connect this way again. And yeah, I think that it would be great for the listeners just to get a sense of who you are and maybe get a sense of what maybe brought you to some of the choices that you made on your journey as you prepared for the birth of your kids and in your choices as parents.
Okay. Well, a little bit about me. Yeah, I'm a stand-up comic and actor, writer. Been in the entertainment industry for almost 17 years now. And me and Genevieve have been together for 10 and a half years now. And a little bit about you.
Oh, when I met Chris, I was working in retail. And then with having kids, it transitioned to selling vintage online.
Cool.
And then we found out Genevieve was pregnant. We're on a road trip, actually, in the States. We're on like a 3-month road trip. And I guess she got pregnant during the first week of the road trip. And we didn't realize until what was it, I guess like a month and a half later or something?
Just over a month later.
Yeah, we were in California and she was having some pains. And I didn't think she was pregnant. I'm like, you're probably just having cramps. Like, you'll get over it. But then she was adamant about going to the doctor. And yeah, I remember walking into I was waiting in the waiting room, and then the doctor was like, Chris, like, can you come in here for a second? And then I was just like, oh, okay. And then I walked in.
That's kind of
I'm like,
scary.
yeah, because we're pretty young. I guess I was 25, you were 24 at the time.
I was 25, he was 26.
Oh, okay. And yeah, I remember her just walking in. She had like tears in her eyes, like, I'm pregnant. I mean, but we had already talked about like if this had happened that, we would want to we wanted a family and everything. So it wasn't planned, but it was, it was
serendipitous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprise.
That's so nice. That's so nice.
You want to talk about why you want to do a natural birth in your experience?
Yeah. So when I found out that I was pregnant, we were in California, and at that point, I just reached out to my family doctor and said, like, hey, I'm pregnant. What do I do now? And she was like, okay, well, do you know where you want to give birth? And I said, well, I'm away right now. I don't know where I'm going to be stationed when we get back. My dad was living in Aurora at the time, and she just referred me to a doctor up in Newmarket at like the Newmarket Hospital. And that's where I started. And when I came back and I told one of my friends, she was like, oh, what about the Toronto Birth Center? And I had never heard of it. So I just started looking into it and looking into midwifery. And it was really like my friend that planted the seed for me. And she didn't have kids. I don't know how she knew about it, but she planted the seed. And I did end up having an OB in Toronto for 2 visits. It was terrible.
Oh, no.
Waiting for forever to see him for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I only saw him for 2 visits, and then I got in with 7th generation midwives. Super happy with my experience there.
Yeah, they took a lot more time. Like for the initial interview, I think we were there for like 45 minutes, and we could ask them anything, and they said we could call them anytime if we had any questions, and felt really warm and welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, such a different experience, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And it's nothing against OBs. It's just like the medical system that they're in. Right? Yeah. Like the time restraints and the way everything is set up, it doesn't foster like a deep connection with the patient. And like some midwives will talk about getting to know your baby, like while you're still pregnant, like they're getting to know your baby because they touch your belly and they take the time, but it just like the medical system doesn't allow for that.
No.
Mm-hmm. So awesome that you guys had a good experience with midwives. I felt the same way. I felt like when I interacted with my midwives, I was fully supported. I could ask any questions, and it's just such a different system that they're in. And so when your friend told you about the birthing center, you were like, what is that? Or were you just like,
so it just got the wheels turning because I was 25 at the time. None of my friends had kids. And my first like mom friend, she was someone that I went to high school with, and she had a surprise pregnancy a couple years prior. And so I just reached out to her for some support.
Mhm.
And she was my only mom friend, my only point of reference at that time.
Yeah, it's tough when you start a family a bit younger because I feel like the average right now is like around 30. And so for a lot of moms who start a little bit younger than that, it's like you have to join like a mom group with people you may not really like get along with, or have anything in common with except being a mom, which I guess is a big point of commonality. Um, or you just have to find like those few people in your life who do have kids around your age and that you do get along, because it's a huge support network when you have other women in your life who can share the same experience, who can kind of guide you and give you tips, and you can collaborate. Like I feel like every couple should have like a network around them of friends who also have kids. It just makes such a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, his dog.
That's okay. That's okay. He can tell his birth story if he wants. I find like babies will always tell their story in their own way.
And
Um,
oh yeah, and also you found out about that documentary, right? The Business of Being Born. Did you know that before you gave birth or after?
Yeah, when I was pregnant, I watched The Business of Being Born. And when I
mhm.
was in labor, like early labor, I was watching more Business of Being Born, which is like the outtakes that they couldn't include in the first.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that that existed.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So what did you feel like you learned, what you took away from that documentary?
Pretty much that women were made to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it's so embedded in who we are as women to carry children and birth children.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big takeaway. And it's a message I will always remind people of, like either that I'm working with or on the podcast or whatever outlets that I have. Because I think like the imagery that we've been brought up with, hey, little guy, that we've been brought up with is so much of the like, as soon as your water breaks, there's this like huge emergency and you got to rush to the hospital as soon as you can. And it's like a very like emergent, urgent, medicalized situation. And then when we're reminded as women and supported by our partners that like we're made for this, or else like humanity wouldn't exist. Like we wouldn't be here on this planet if like we weren't made to do this.
Yeah,
And
people
the other
doing this in like caves, like
yeah, yeah,
no.
yeah. And speaking of caves, is like you think of like that's how we evolved, is going to somewhere that's like dark, private, isolated, like you're not disturbed because that was safe. Like there were no predators, right? Like you were protected in that area. And it's usually at night that it happens. So it's like the lighting, everything. But then you go into a hospital, which is fine to birth in a hospital, but it's like it's working against our biology. It's these like bright fluorescent lights. It's definitely not private when you have like a lot of doctors, nurses, whoever might be supporting you, as well as the residents, like a lot of strangers, right? Like they might be great people and great healthcare providers, but they're still people you often haven't met before. So it feels like it's a very private, vulnerable situation that you're in, and you're exposed to strangers. It's a very weird thing for our biology.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So
When you're saying just something you said about the thinking it's an emergency as soon as the water breaks, like
mhm.
I had some writing classes at Second City that I was taking at the time, and Genevieve's water broke, and I was like, should we like do something? Should we go to the birth center? And she's like, no, I think like I have time. She's like, you can go to your class. So she like her water broke and she like sent me out of the house for 4 hours to go to this writing class. And then I got back late at night. I remember being in the class and people were like, your wife's water, why are you here? Like I'm like, I gotta write these sketches.
Priorities. But Genevieve, how are you confident to say like you can go, or was it something that you felt intuitively in your body, or were you just like I know I have time, I've done the research? Like what made you feel confident in that decision?
So my water broke around 6 p.m. and I called my midwife pretty much as soon as I realized. I was like, yeah, it's happening. And they said to me, oh, okay, well, let's check back in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I said to him, like, yeah, go to your writing class and I'll let you know. I was just at home and, you know, it eased in. But by the time he came back home, I was like, yeah, this is going. He probably came home maybe around 10 p.m. and I wasn't able to sleep at all that night. Midwife came in to our place maybe around 2 a.m. and she checked me out at home. And then she said, do you want to continue laboring here or do you want to go to the birth center? And I said, no, let's go to the birth center. So we got to the birth center maybe around 3:30 a.m. so glad it was in the middle of the night because we were living on the West End and the birth center's on the East End. But I
No
felt
traffic.
I felt every single pothole. Like, please.
Be gentle.
When I first got there, I went into the tub. The tub was not for me. Very soon, both my hands and my feet were like going numb. I lost sensation. So transitioned out of there. I did end up like going on the bed and like I was on my back when I gave birth, which I didn't end up doing for the second, but I think I had already been awake for, you know, over 24 hours at that point. And I was like, I'm just so tired. I just need to lie down.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the pushing was like 30 minutes or less. And our son was born around 6:20 a.m. And then they sent us home around 10 a.m.
Wow. So you were home like within hours
Yeah.
of your son being born. Yeah.
And I like the experience too, just because, you know, I got to be right there. And it was, you know, it was just, what, 4 of us in the room?
Yeah.
Like me, her, the midwife, and then her assistant. And I don't know, yeah, and I hear sometimes like other dads' experiences, and they're like, yeah, I was just in the waiting room, like just waiting, you know? And I'm like, I mean, I guess that's one way to have it, but, you know, kind of being in the thick of it, you really get to see the strength of women firsthand, you know? Like I was very impressed after.
It is impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, just seeing what they have to go through and like seeing, like, how is this going to fit? How?
I know. How does it actually happen? I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. And to see like your own child emerge, it's like such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, I didn't expect to cry. Like the thought in my head, it didn't even cross my mind that I might cry when I saw my baby. And then like, as soon as I saw him, like, just like floodgates opened up. I started bawling so hard. I was just so happy. I've never felt like in a wave of emotion, like, you know, hit me so strongly before. And it was crazy. Like I was bawling and Genevieve's just there. Like she wasn't crying at all. She's just, you know, like happy it was over, I guess.
Yeah. It's so funny. You can never predict your response, your reaction, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Genevieve, how did you feel in that moment?
Well, definitely in birth, I feel like you're in like a cocoon or a bubble. Like it's a completely different world experience from regular waking life.
Totally.
So yeah, just a very kind of euphoric experience. Like I knew as much pain as it was, because, you know, I did it naturally. There's no option for pain relief at the birth center.
Okay.
You know,
did they have like nitrous oxide or anything to offer you?
They didn't offer me that, so I'm not sure if they have that. But yeah, I didn't take anything.
Yeah.
So pretty much just being able to feel everything and being in tune with your body, like that was really important to me. And I knew as much pain as I had been in, I knew that I wasn't going to do it just once. Like for some reason, I was like, this is going to happen again for me because it's just such a, you know, what an experience.
Yeah. Were there moments during the labor or the birth that you had wished that you had some kind of pain modulating medication or anything? No? You were just like, this is what I'm doing. These discomforts, the waves, the surges, the pain, like it's purposeful.
Yeah.
And I know that it's going to result in me seeing my baby.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What was that?
I said hardcore.
She's hardcore. Yeah. I think it's like there's a choice, and like it stems from like the research that you did, like watching that documentary and kind of reframing your perspective on birth and what it means and the outcomes and all of that stuff. And so I find couples who go into it with that intention, like this, like my body was made for this, and their partners support them in that. It's like not even a question of having, you know, an epidural or whatever it is. But I did speak to a doula about a month ago, and she was saying like we're still human. So often when we go into a hospital environment, and like even if our intention is like I don't want an epidural, I don't want any of the interventions, if you're in like so much discomfort and you're experiencing so much intensity, and you know like the anesthesiologist is like just around the corner, it's kind of like, you know, like a human response just to be like, yes, like I need that, right? And so the fact that you were in a birthing center and that wasn't really an option, it's like it's not even on the table, and that probably supported your ability to just continue and like continue trusting your body and continue getting in tune with your body. And I like that you mentioned like feeling all the sensations, I think
Mhm.
that's important because it's not a matter of just like, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to tolerate it. And yes, it can be really intense and really uncomfortable, but those sensations actually are a part of what creates an efficient birth. And so when we do feel those things, like the hormones and the feedback systems in our bodies support a faster, more efficient birth. And so for anyone who's listening, it's not just something that you have to tolerate. That's actually like a part of the process, and learning how to reframe your relationship with those sensations is really what makes the difference.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think so too, which is why I do what I do. So what was it like taking baby home, and now you guys are parents? You did this like awesome birth experience, and now you're parents, you're in it, and you're young. You guys are like 25, 26.
Yeah, first night was crazy. He like couldn't sleep, and he was just screaming basically the whole night. We lived in an apartment where there's people like above us and below us,
Oh
like
man.
really small apartment building. And
Yeah.
we like took him out to the car at one point because we thought he was disturbing the neighbors too much. And then I think he had a little trouble like breastfeeding in the beginning.
Yeah, just for a short while, there was a little bit of a hurdle. I went to a Lelesh League meeting.
Mm.
I was very determined to breastfeed, and there wasn't anything stopping me from doing that. So he was exclusively breastfed and breastfed until he was a little over 2.5.
Wow. You did it for the long haul.
Yeah, my goal was 2 years, and then it went
Yeah.
past that.
Yeah. That's funny. My goal was 1 year, and I went 2 years with both.
Yeah.
With my first, it was the pandemic. I was really trying to stop, and then she was at home with me again after the pandemic. After I returned to work, I was like, okay, like I can continue this a little bit longer. And then with my second, it was more of a bonding security thing. So for anyone listening, though, the La Leche League, if you go to their website, they're super helpful, and obviously you guys found it really valuable as well and supportive. Did your midwife support you as well with the breastfeeding journey?
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Yeah, I felt like that too. They come to your house. Anyone who's listening and is like, should I go with midwives, or whatever choice you make is your choice, and that's fine. But just know that if you have a midwife, they come to you after the birth.
I think after the birth, they came and
Yeah.
did checks, and they can call them and ask them questions.
Yeah. So
Well,
helpful.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine if we just left the hospital and we're like, all right, good luck. Just Google some shit if it comes up.
That's how it is. That's how it is. Yeah. We'll see you in 6 weeks, basically, right?
Yeah.
And the first 6 weeks are like you said, the first night is insane, right? So
Mhm.
the first 6 weeks are also really insane. I
Wow.
felt the same way the first night with my first. She sounded like a pterodactyl. I had this like beautiful birth experience, and then when she started crying, I was like, oh, right, we have a baby now that we have to take care of.
Yeah, wild.
It's such a wild journey. Yeah. And so you guys, you mentioned in your comedy stand up, you guys have chosen to co-sleep as well.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
what kind of guided that decision?
So definitely like with our first, we were in a 1-bedroom apartment. So he was right next to us in the bassinet at first. And then with breastfeeding, it just made sense to have him in the bed at certain times, like he was still in the bassinet at other times, like literally right next to us. But sometimes it worked to co-sleep. It's definitely, nerve-wracking when they're tiny, but when they're this size, it's not as nerve-wracking.
Yes.
And so many consecutive nights, you have more confidence. But yeah, for those that are breastfeeding, it's just so much easier.
So much easier. I agree. Especially as you're healing from the birth itself, to have to get up and go to like a bassinet that might be like further away from your bed or to another bedroom. It's actually like more supportive for the mom's healing and bonding as well, and so that you can get some rest. I found that too. Like my plan wasn't to have my babies in the bed. Like I had the bassinet there, and with breastfeeding, it's as long as you are not on drugs, it's for the most, like it's safe if you take the proper precautions. It's safe. And I had Dr. Sarah Buckley on the podcast, and she was also describing how biologically it makes sense. We were never evolved to have, and like I know that there's different circumstances for everyone, and you make your individual choices, but it doesn't make sense that in the wild, the way that we've evolved over centuries, to have your child like vulnerably away from you, right?
Yeah.
It just makes sense to have them always close to mom and both parents. So yeah, I found it much easier. I could get more rest. It just made so much more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked about your experience with the midwives, and you guys did the same thing for your second as well.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I was just gonna say about your water breaking the second time.
yeah, we can get into that. But I ended up having, so one good thing about the midwives is that, at least for seventh generation, because I had already done a birth with them, you get
Priority.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I had the same primary midwife, and then I had a different secondary one. But just having that security of person like was really important for me.
Mhm.
It was a little bit different because so when I got pregnant, it was, well, like December 2021, but we found out January 2022. And things were just kind of wrapping up in the pandemic sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in March that they lifted the mask mandate, but they didn't lift it
Okay.
for like doctors' offices.
Yeah.
That was kind of a headache. And essentially, because I didn't want to wear a mask, they had me come in at like the very end of the day. That there was less people around. Anyway, they still respected my wishes, but it was, a little bit of a hurdle as well, like just navigating that.
Yeah. I think we're not really talking about what happened during the pandemic for pregnant couples. The fact that the same doula that I mentioned before, the fact that she was like, some partners weren't allowed in the labor suite with their wife to see like their child being born, and yet the doctor would bring in like 5 residents, and she's like, that didn't make sense because the partner lives with this woman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women felt like they couldn't breathe through the masks, and you're in labor and pushing and all of that stuff. So I think there was just this blanket recommendation, and the common sense about like this specific situation was lumped in with all those recommendations, and it really should have been given a little bit more attention, because the way you describe your experience, Chris, when you saw the birth of your first child, imagine not being allowed in that room, right? So
Absolutely. It's
so
like a
yeah.
life experience.
Yeah. It's great that we're past that, but so unfortunate that so many couples had to navigate the system. But I will say one thing that was maybe positive was a lot of people started considering birthing in like outside of the hospital, like if it was safe for them, because like everyone was trying to stay away from the hospitals at that time, right? So I think it maybe opened people's eyes and mind to the fact that there are safe options outside of the hospital, as long as you're supported and it makes sense for you. So I think that's one thing that was positive that came out of that time.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your second experience, if you're okay with that.
Yeah. So our second, he was born in the exact same room at the Toronto Birth Center.
With the same midwife?
No, unfortunately not. My first
okay.
primary was not able to be there. So that was a bummer for me, but it all's well. And so with my first, my water broke immediately, like the first thing, that was my first sign. So our first was born September 1st, and our second was due, I think the due date was September 14th.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when I first went earlier, he was born at exactly 39 weeks. So I had a feeling like there's potential for going earlier. I was pretty much like at the end of August, I was like, okay, time to get going and get ready. And so on the first, it was the last day of August, August 31st, I thought that my water broke. And didn't end up being the case.
What was the case?
Just some more discharge than you would expect, I guess.
I know, stuff happens at the end of pregnancy.
Yeah. So the next day was our son's birthday. And I was like, I got to go to the midwife and have her, assess the situation, check it out. Because they were like, if it was your water breaking, then you need to give birth in this amount of time. So she checked me out and she said, yeah, I don't think that was your water breaking. So we carried our birthday celebrations. And I guess the night of the second, in the evening time, like after dinner, is when things started going with our second. And I was able to sleep a little bit, so that was good. Probably around 3 a.m. in the morning, the contractions were too much that I was awake at that point. And then, do you remember what time we got to the birth center?
Like 5 or 6 or something like that.
Oh, my friend came over to watch our older son. and she was here. She came here at 6:30, so I think we left shortly after 7, and yeah, got to the birth center probably around 7:30 or 8. And then it was very different. Like I already knew that I wasn't going to do the tub. They gave me a yoga ball, which I didn't have that option. I wasn't given that experience before. I just remember like holding on to the bed while being on this yoga ball, and my knees were like digging into the bed, and the midwife and Chris were like kind of massaging out my back for some pain relief, but my water still hadn't broken at that point. And so, you know, things were going, and maybe around just before 11 o'clock, I said to my midwife, I'm like, do you think you could give us a minute? I pretty much gave him like a little pep talk, which was more of a pep talk for myself. And I was like, this baby needs to come now. I'm like, we got to get this baby out of me. And pretty much I'm like holding his hand, and as I'm telling him this.
Oh, she told us the midwife told me to like rub the lower part of her back while she's like laying on her side. So then she was like, just give it like a little force and like, you know, like a pressure on the lower part of her back. And then, yeah, and then I'm gonna say.
Well, yeah, as I'm giving him this pep talk, the water just gushed out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like exploded on me. Which was, yeah.
And then I was like, what my midwife said, Kendra! Outside the door.
That's so
So
funny.
it was the complete opposite. Like my first had started with the water breaking, and then my second, it was like, that was, you know, starting the very end.
Yeah.
Of the process.
Yeah, and then he came out pretty soon
He
after, right?
He was born at 11:30, and I was on like all fours to give birth to him. So when they delivered him, he came right under towards me.
Oh, nice. Nice. And so were you the first one to, like, did you catch baby the second time?
No, so pretty much the midwife just like handed him to me. She caught him and then right under me.
Nice.
Yeah, we thought he was gonna be a girl too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you not do like the ultrasounds and stuff?
We
to
did.
find out?
Yeah, we did one, but then they said based on his positioning, they couldn't really tell. They're like, we think it's a girl, but they're like, just the way that he's moving, we can't really tell. So,
they weren't calling him he at that point.
But yeah. But we thought he was gonna be a girl just based on, what was it, like you had some like ancient or like some Asian, like Chinese birth graphs or something?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Has to do with like the age of the woman during conception and the month of conception.
Yeah.
So it was right for my first, and then for my second, it said girl. So it was that. My pregnancies were different, so I was just inclined to think, oh, it's different. It's gonna be a girl.
Yeah. I know I had the same experience. Yeah. With my first, we did the ultrasound and positioning, like they couldn't see. And so my mom and everyone was like, it's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy. And she turned out to be a girl. And with the second one, my mom was convinced because of the Chinese gender graph or birth graph that it was going to be a boy. And yeah, it was a girl. And the pregnancy was different. And like, you can't really tell. And I feel like even when like a lot of people, like even the mother can sometimes feel like the gender, and like, I don't know, birth is interesting. Like it just kind of humbles us so much, right? We can try and predict and control and do all the things, and nope. Nature just takes over. And these little ones, they have their own agenda, and they come out when they want and where they want and how they want. And it's so interesting to me that the water, like the tub, was not for you, and that you lost sensation in your feet and your hands, you said. And so what do you think, that was just the positioning of baby, like on a nerve, or did your midwives give you any insight on that?
No one ever explained it any further to me, and I really heard any of the same experience. One of our friends gave birth at the Toronto Birth Center as well, and she had a water birth, and she didn't, relay any of that information to me, so I assume it didn't happen to her.
Yeah. I mean, it's everyone has different preferences, and like for some people, the water gives a lot of pain relief and kind of that buoyancy and that freedom of movement. And some people just hate the sensation, or their body responds differently to it. But I've never heard of actually losing sensation in the feet and the hands. So that's so interesting. I'm curious to know what that is. That's going to be like bouncing around in my mind for a little while. Yeah. So what would you say you really took away from those two experiences, and maybe what you encounter as like the common culture around birth currently.
Well, I mean, it's obviously much more prevalent to go to an OBGYN. I don't think enough people know about the option of midwifery. And with that being said, there's also like long wait lists. So you have to get in early with a midwife for sure. And again, it's just like when I first got pregnant, I thought you give birth in a hospital. Like that's just the norm.
Mhm.
So, but it's only been the norm for about 100 years. So relearning what birth can be like, I think is pretty important. And, you know, there's so many more opportunities available that people aren't made to know about.
And also with like, you know, them kind of pushing C-sections more in hospitals, I guess just because it's faster, you know, you can like bang it out way quicker. 'Cause you did like talk about like the poll you did on your thing with like people who've had emergency C-sections.
Yeah, I mean, in recent years, I've known about 5 people who have had emergency C-section. And I'm pretty sure all of them had interventions, or most of them had interventions. And I don't know that many people who have given birth or have kids. Like my 3 best friends don't have kids. So even from watching The Business of Being Born, I know that the C-section rate is like 40%, give or take, in North America.
Yeah, like in Canada, it's about 30%. Yeah, which is a third. So it's quite high. And in some countries, it's like 40%. In Brazil, it's like 80%,
Wow.
which
Holy.
is, yeah, like they say in Brazil, if you didn't have a C-section, it's because you didn't get to the hospital in time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think just that fact alone shows that there's like a cultural impact on it, because and probably the training involved, and sometimes it's necessary, and it's so amazing that we have that option, and sometimes it can be life-saving, but there is this tendency, and I heard also, like, just for the training of residents in hospitals, it's like in July you'll get all of your C-section experience, because they'll push for C-sections more so that the residents get their training.
Oh, wow.
So it's not like the fact that there's waves of it, and like different countries have different rates. Like there is that cultural impact. There is the impact of the provider on it, the scheduling, the hospital policy, all of that stuff. But regardless of that, I think like the approach that you both took to birth is an empowered approach. Like you educated yourselves, you looked for different options, you got the support that you wanted from midwives. You got a little lucky that you were able to get in with the midwives in Toronto. I know not everyone, like one of my best friends tried with different locations of midwives and couldn't get in with any of them. So there's a little bit of luck involved there. But you can still have a really empowered experience. You can get the support that you want, doulas, birth coaches. Yeah, there's lots of options. I think the important thing to take away from this conversation is just that when you take an active role and you don't just kind of go with whatever you're told, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeking out information instead of just, you know, being told what to do and following along.
Yeah. That's kind of the whole mission that I'm on, is just to kind of let people know, like, you have options and you can have a different experience, and you can actually create the experience that you want. And I don't know, Genevieve, if you felt like this, but like after you give birth, you're like, whoa, like I'm so powerful. Like you can actually create life. Like you brought life into this world, into this reality. It's so empowering. And like you described it as euphoric. And like for anyone listening, like you can have that experience. Birth can be humbling and things can happen that we don't expect to happen, but it can be like one of the most life-changing, transformative experiences of your whole life. And for your partner, you said it was a life-changing experience as well. So that's possible, I think, when we take ownership of our bodies, our babies, our families. Yeah, it's a big message that I want everyone to hear. But yeah. So how do you guys feel just about parenthood in general? You guys are a little bit younger than most parents when they start their families. So what's that experience been like? And what's it like to have 2 little boys running around?
Yeah, so the age difference between them is 6 years and 2 days. So it's a pretty big gap, bigger than most. But honestly, I couldn't have done it any sooner because, you know, we're pretty hands-on parents. I was home with my first for 2 years, and then he went to daycare for 2 years. And then at that point is when the pandemic happened, and we ended up homeschooling him for JK and SK. So all hands on deck, like
Yeah.
not taking any shortcuts in this parenthood journey.
It doesn't sound like it. Yeah. Yeah. So intense. Did you guys go a little bit insane during the pandemic? I did a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I think probably the first like couple weeks, the first month was probably the hardest to get used to, just being inside all the time. And then
Yeah.
I think after a little while, maybe when it started to warm up and, you can go outside a little bit more and go for walks, then started to settle in and kind of get used to it. But yeah, there's definitely crazy times, when you're just in the house all day, and nowhere to go. And there's just a 3-year-old running around going nuts.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think so
But
many
now,
parents feel like that. Yeah.
yeah. But now I think, I think I love being a parent, it's super fun. I've always wanted to be a dad. Hold on a second.
Mhm.
I just gotta wipe this down.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a dad, and I have lots of fun playing with them, and just love exploring, going out to the forest where, whenever I have time, we're out in the street playing with the neighborhood kids, and it's just fun watching them grow up. And my dad and both my parents were very good parents to me and spent a lot of time with me. So I just
Mhm.
we try and do that with them. And yeah, I don't have any problems with it. Obviously, you wish you had more energy to do some things that you want on your own, or, have some time to yourself. But at the end of the day, it's still like the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about how Chris's comedy just went up.
Oh, really? More material when you have
Yeah,
a kid.
material help.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess I was like in comedy as well, like not many people have kids, especially at my age too, like when I was like
Oh,
25.
true.
But luckily one of my best friends had a kid. So he gave me a lot of advice, and he told me, he's like, bro, this isn't the end. He was actually mad. He's like, I had like the dad material like under control, but now he's like, I'm pissed because you get that
Yeah.
material now too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, like
About your showcase.
oh yeah, well, like kind of I guess the way how everything happens for a reason is for comedians, like Just for Laughs, is like a big deal and can like,
Mhm.
be a game changer for your career. And when we found out that she was pregnant, we had to come back to Toronto. And then because we came back, I got to do a showcase for Just for Laughs. And then I ended up booking Just for Laughs during that showcase. And then yeah, so kind of like because she got pregnant, one of like my biggest lifelong dreams got to come to fruition. And then when I went to Just for Laughs, I ended up getting like runner up in this competition. And then like 2 months later, there was another stand-up competition and I won like $25,000. And that was just, I think having the baby and having a new family was just motivation where I was like, I
Mhm.
gotta win this, and
Yeah.
because of that, I don't know, it just gave me a little extra juice. And yeah, I ended up winning. And then after that, it's been, slow progression of like, bigger and better things in my career. But it all comes back to starting the family, which is something that, most people would be terrified to think that their career is over if they're in their
Mhm.
mid-20s and have a baby on the way. And, we didn't even have anywhere to live. Like like when we came back, she had to live with her dad. I was living with my grandma, and, we're looking for a place. And, it was kind of scary, but I feel like if you have faith, and like I'm a pretty positive person, that, I feel like everything usually works out if you have the right mindset. And
Mhm.
obviously bad shit might happen in life, but as long as you stay positive, then I feel like the universe or God will, he'll reward you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like the mindset piece is so big in parenting. And when bad things happen, like personally, I had like we put down our family pet. I separated, moved, so I had to let go of my business, and then my mom passed away, and my ex went to rehab. It was like all in a matter of 6 weeks.
Oh my
And
God.
so yeah, so I was like, it'll be 2 years in September. So for me, I was like, okay, what can I do here? I have like two little girls. I had like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm like, okay, what can I do here? And then they became the motivation for creating a different life. Like they become your inspiration. Being a parent is it gives you so much power and so much strength that like otherwise I would have just been in like a ball in my bed for months and months, And so it's yeah, you need support for sure as parents, but you have so much power and you have like tenfold creative ability because you just have to be creative to make things work as a parent, right? And like, yeah, it changes our brains, I think.
And I think
Yeah.
it's, it's great just for, it's like, it's part of the human experience, like,
Mhm.
I feel like everyone should, I mean, like, if you're able to, obviously you don't have to, and some people have, might have some medical issues where they might not be able to. But I mean, if you are able to, I feel like you should do it because I mean, it's just like a point in life, like everyone has to be a kid. Everyone's got to be a teenager. You got to grow up and just experience certain things that, change your reference and change your view on the world. Because
Mhm.
I'm definitely more emotional now that I have kids, like I don't know, like certain things just make me tear up nowadays where I'm like, yeah, like I gotta take some testosterone pills or something. But like I attribute it though to just, I don't know, being more sensitive to having children
Mhm.
and kind of just, having a more open mind and being more empathetic to people in general.
Yeah, I think so. And it really, well, before I go on, I do want to say, like, I also think people need to want to be parents before,
Yeah.
because oh my God, it's like so much work and like changes your whole life. And like, you have to say goodbye to that freedom that you had where you could just like go wherever you please, whenever you please, and to be like a conscious parent as well, right? To want to be good for this little human that you're raising. But yeah, it's an incredible experience, and like whoever can and is able and is willing, I think it's like nothing will transform you as fast as becoming a parent. But I did also want to say, like, the empathetic part, like, you now I'm sure relate to, it's almost like you have this different relation to other kids as well. Like you understand that, like, you understand what it's like to be a parent, to bring life into this world. You have like more empathy for other parents and want the best for all kids, because when we're all well, it's better for our own children, it's better for us as well. So I think it connects us to other humans on a deeper level as well. And yeah,
I feel
it's
like
so
even just
transformative.
like a community sense, like,
Yeah.
if we're living just by ourselves, I feel like, we probably wouldn't be as neighborly as we would. But just having kids, when people see you have kids, for some reason, they're just more likely to talk to you and like
Yeah.
interact.
Yeah.
And, I've talked to like so many people on our street now, and,
Mm.
some of our neighbor kids, I'll watch them as we're all playing outside and stuff. And yeah, I don't know. It feels good to just have a community, I guess.
Yeah. It builds community fast when you have little ones running around, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to ask one last question before we head off, which is a question I ask all of my guests. But before I say that, is there anything that you want to share, that you feel called to share about your experience, or just advice for parents? You guys did it a little bit younger, so maybe advice for younger parents.
I'd say, it doesn't matter if you're young or old, like there's never a right time. Or, like in your head, you're gonna be like, oh, I gotta wait for the perfect time to have my
Mm.
kid. And then I feel like if that happens, you're just gonna be waiting forever, because there's always gonna be something in your way that's gonna tell you why you should wait to have more kids, or to
Mhm.
have kids in general. But, I'd say just embrace it if it happens, just take it as a sign that that's what the universe is putting in your way. And, just try your best. People have done it for thousands, for forever, so
Mhm.
like we can do it.
Yeah. We can do it. Our bodies know what to do. Our
Yeah.
brains know what to do for the most part. We just need a little support. So the question I like to ask everyone is, because the intro to this podcast is, let's imprint love, safety, and trust onto the next generation. And I really believe, like, when a new life is coming into this world, there's a profound imprint that happens. And oxytocin, which is the main hormone of labor and birth, the signatures of that hormone are love and safety and trust. And I want to empower women and their partners to create an environment and create their birth experience so that that can happen. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, so much of our system works against our biology. And so it's not love and safety and trust that's imprinted. It could be mistrust. It could be a sense of just like survival mode that's imprinted, anxiety, uncertainty that's imprinted. And I feel like that kind of, it stays in our cellular memory for the rest of our life, and it's not permanent. You can do work to repair, but like, if we can prevent that, if we can avoid that, if we can have these empowered experiences, then let's go for that, right? So if you were to imprint something onto the listeners, it could be parents who are thinking about starting, or couples who are thinking about starting a family in the preconception phase, the pregnancy phase, women and their partners preparing for birth in the postpartum phase, or anyone who's just kind of ready to birth like something creative into the world, something beautiful into the world, a business, or go for their ideal dream career, whether it's a comedian or an artist or whatever it might be. What would you like to imprint onto the listeners' ears?
I guess stay open-minded. And, because I got pregnant at 25 and I told you I didn't have many friends that had kids, like I didn't have those stories of fear or those stories of trauma in my head. My head was like, I don't know anything.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So coming into it with that blank slate was so vital for the trajectory of my pregnancies and labors and the way that we parent together. So, someone else's story doesn't need to be your story. You can go your own way, Fleetwood Mac.
Nice. So well said. So simple. Perfect.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, just, if it's regards to, any dreams that you have, or if you're thinking of having children or whatever, like, just go for it. Like, just follow your gut, is probably the best advice that I've ever had with regards to my career and with having children was, I could have seen on paper why I shouldn't have started or on paper, like why I shouldn't have started into comedy, but my gut, it told me that I should. And the same thing with kids, like there was, tons of reasons why we shouldn't have had a kid because we're in the States and we're homeless and not homeless, but, we didn't have a place to live. And, I didn't have a job at the time either. And everything was crazy, but, I just followed my gut and expected everything to work out and had a good mindset. And I, tried to work hard. So everything worked out. Just follow your gut and I think everything will fall into place.
I think you're right. Follow your gut, and your story is your story. Their story doesn't have to be your story. And you guys both said it so well. And I just want to thank you both again for taking the time, especially with a little one. It's Jasper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with Jasper. And yeah, I appreciate you just expressing your experience, and hopefully the listeners can take away lots of wisdom and just be inspired to write their own story like you are saying. And yeah, thank you again so much for taking the time, and hopefully we can do this again. Hopefully I can see you in your stand-up again, and I wish you guys both the best of luck in everything and your family.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.